Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. On the last segment, I tried to give you kind of a progression of the instruments throughout history, what was way back and how the instruments developed, including the ocarinas, because they developed into the woodwinds later on. And so we have a wide range of instruments now. But just focusing on the woodwinds, which are the melody instruments that I teach in here? How many melody instruments are there? And so I'm going to just go through a few of them just by a list, and then they all kind of play in the same kind of way, which is why you could transfer what you know from one instrument to another instrument. We have, of course, the melody flutes, the recorders, penny whistles, sassotos, song flutes, tonettes, flutophones, fifes, and regular flutes. And then, of course, some of the recorders you can subdivide. You have conical recorders, you have cylindrical recorders, you have sweet tones, and some people would put in other instruments as well. You know, but we're talking right now about instruments that you put in your mouth and you actually play them with tone holes. So other instruments, this is basically what I'm dealing with. Saxophones, clarinets, oboes, and bassoons are not really, I don't call them melody instruments, they're woodwinds, but I call the melody flutes the smaller ones, the ones that you could play descant harmonies on, the ones like they use in Irish music, and the recorders especially. Recorders, even though they're a simple instrument, they do play a lot of really, really good music. You can play a lot of classical music on them. So what I really want to do is to start kind of a review. How do you pick it up? How do you hold it? How do you blow into it? How do you tongue it? And all of these things are important. And then getting into time. I don't know who's been watching all this time that I've been on the air. I've been on the air quite a bit. And but there are people who come and go until they start watching, and they need to have a review of what we teach in the beginning. As I progress more and more into more difficult types of music, we need to review the simple things, because most people who play the recorder are not going to go on and become professional recorder players. Not that they couldn't. There are recorders that are used in professional music all the time. In some places in Europe, they have recorder orchestras. All the orchestras are made with recorders, nothing else but recorders, and some of the simple instruments. As a matter of fact, I've been in some of those orchestras where it's just all recorders. They could have a band or a choir of recorders, maybe 40 different types of recorders, all playing together like they were in a band or an orchestra, and they make very beautiful music. They're a very simple instrument, but at the same time, they can play a tremendous amount of music. They can't play in every key, but they can play in a lot of keys. Recorders are good for the key of C and G and D, and also F. Those F. F is one flat, and I can use it also in the key of B flat as well. I've learned how to do that because you just manipulate the instrument. You can play all kinds of things. It can play sometimes in the key of E flat, but it's a lot more difficult to do. So what you do is when you get the recorder, what happens? How do you play it? How do you hold it? These are very basic things, but if you're new to the show and you don't know these things, you can get yourself off to a very bad start if you don't know what the fundamentals are. So I want to spend some time just doing the fundamentals. First of all, when you have a recorder, you can actually, and I'm not going to pull it apart, but it has 3 parts. And this top part here, this is a stag. You can see that there's a little block. You can see right through the instrument to the block, which is why I brought this one. And you blow in here. The mouthpiece is right on the top. There's a little slit in there that you blow in. The air actually goes down here. There's a little bulge in the instrument. I hope you can see that all right. And it goes down here. You can see part of the block. And then you get down here, and a lot of the air comes down here and goes out of this little square area, which is called the labium. And then you can see part of that block. It becomes a part of the mouthpiece. That block goes from here. It's shaped like this. It's shaped like the mouthpiece. The air goes down here. You're blowing in here, and then it goes out the labium. But the longer the tube, the lower the notes, and so you can get all kinds of notes from it. This is a Skag instrument. I have 3 or 4 of them. I like them very much, but they're not quite as professional as other instruments like the Casio and the Yamaha would be. So let me take a Casio. This one here is a Yamaha. Very nice instrument. When you start to play it, you make sure that these joints are all together, head joint, body, and finally foot joint. I could pull this apart. I've decided not to do it. I've done it many times with different instruments. There are certain instruments that I'm willing to pull apart, and they seem to thrive well on it. Others I prefer not to. So at any rate, you must always have your left hand on top and your right hand on the bottom. I've seen students try to do it the other way, and it never works. Any woodwind instrument, and this is where you can transfer what you know from one instrument to another: flute, clarinet, saxophone, oboe, bassoon, the left hand always on top. B, A, G. And then the right hand on the bottom. F, A, D, F, E, D. If you remember the 2 words, bag, fed, that's what I used to teach the kids when I was teaching them. B, A, G, left hand. And then your right hand goes on this 4th one down, F, E, D, and then if you use the last note, that's going to be the C. That's the whole scale, and that's the way you have to hold it. And when you hold the instrument, you do not flatten your fingers like this. I've seen a lot of people try to do that. You won't be able to cover the holes properly. If you don't cover the holes properly, you do not get the notes. So you have to curve your hands and hold it like this. That means your left hand is maybe a little bit slanted up, and your right hand also. And this finger here, the tendency is to lean it against the instrument, which you shouldn't do. It should be against the hole, but there will be a little bit of slant to it because of the shape of the instrument. Then the low C is down here. So if you want to play it, you put it in your mouth, the instrument in your mouth, about 1/3 of the way. You put your teeth, your front teeth, on here, and your lip, your bottom lip covers your teeth, and it's underneath on here. So it's kind of like this. And you notice that I'm tonguing all of my notes. I do not slur the note unless it's obvious from the music that the note needs to be slurred. To slur it means you don't tongue it. You may tongue the first note and then not tongue the others, but there would always be a mark in the music to show you that that note is held and not tongued. Usually you tongue all of your notes. If you don't tongue your notes, you're not going to get a good tone. So if you can remember, the first note that you're going to learn is probably going to be this B. Why the B? It's easier to hold. It's easier to balance. You have your thumb on the thumb hole in back, which you do for most of the notes, and the first finger on the first hole, and it makes it easier to balance. It is fairly easy to drop an instrument. There's no strap. Some of the larger instruments, including the bass clarinet, the bass recorder, has a strap. The bass instruments, I started to say bass clarinet, bass saxophones, bass clarinet, bass recorder, they all have straps around your neck. And if you did happen to lose it, it doesn't fall to the ground. These smaller instruments do not have straps. So this is the B right here, B, A, G, B, A, G, bag. And so you would put it in your mouth with the thumb hole covering and the first finger covering. That's a child's song that most of my students, for some reason, they love to play it. And every time they came in for lessons, they would ask to play it. It's written out in their books, you know. For some reason, I think it's the first song that they know, the first song they're able to play. And so therefore, they want to play it all the time. And you notice when I'm playing it, I really tongue the notes. If I didn't tongue them, those notes would not be clear. It would be... And that does not sound good. It just does not sound good. So when you're tonguing, it's as if you're saying T or ta. Your tongue actually goes up and stops the progression of the air and makes the notes singular and sharp and clear. So you start with a B, easy to handle, easy to remember, and then you add the next note down, and that's going to be an A, B, A. And then you add another note, and that's going to be a G. Now you notice that the notes are clear, and they're sharp, and they come across, not blurry, not slurring, not blurry, they just come on as singular, clear notes, and this is what is supposed to happen. But you have to have the instrument in the right position. You have to have the ear support from your lungs to do it. You have to be able to put your fingers on the holes in the right way so that all of the holes are covered the way that they should be covered. If you don't cover your holes right, the air leaks out and you get either an extra tone or you don't get the note that you want. If you don't have it covered, it's just not right. And you can do this all the way up and down the scale. Now the C scale would start on the C. That has no sharps and no flats. But the C is the second note, the second hole down with your middle finger. And so it's easier to start with the B. Now the C is the top of the C scale. So if you were to do it right, and you notice that this B is a little lower than the C in terms of pitch. So you start on the B because of the balance, because it's easier to hold on to. It's not so easy to drop. But the C, which is one note higher than the B, is this. So therefore, if you were going from a B to the C, this is the B, you would have to put the C down and lift the B exactly at the same time as you put the C down. Otherwise, you're going to get an extra note that you don't want. If you don't do that, you're going to get an A. Now, what if you wanted a D, which is even higher than the C? Well, then you would lift this thumb up, and the only note that you would have down would be this middle finger. So that's the D. It's very easy to drop it. It's very easy to do harm to it. It's very easy to lose your balance with it. So therefore, we usually do not teach that note until you have some kind of a grasp as to how to hold the instrument. Now you know that this is B, A, G, and the thumb is on the tone hole in the back. And that's important to keep it there. There are some notes when you will take it off, like in the D that I just showed you, or if you want an octave. If you want an octave, here's your, let's see, you want a G. This is B, A, G. You want a high G, not a low G. You would take your thumb and you'd slide it back, and so that it's only halfway covered. And that's called half holing. That can give you an octave. That's an octave. And all I did to get that octave was I pulled my thumb down, and the tone hole is here. I pulled my thumb down so it's only half covered. That hole is only half covered, and that's called half holing, and that bounces up some notes to an octave higher. I can do it for several notes. Now, it doesn't work with every note, but it works with most of the notes. On that D, you don't do that for the D. Here's the low D, and I can squeeze a high D out of it by doing that same technique. But the proper way to play that D is to use this fingering. So if you're going from a low octave to a high octave on the D, the fingering's a little different. You will learn that as you start learning how to play D, E, F, G. If I wanted to play low D, the tone hole is covered. If I want to play high D, well, I'm not going to just leave that half open. It's better to leave all of it open and play it with the fingering that I showed you. Now I could squeeze it out by pulling this down, but that's not the appropriate way, and sometimes it's not exactly in pitch. That's the way to do it. So when you start learning, you learn 1 or 2 notes maybe a lesson. You start off with that B, then you add the A, and notice that the tone hole in the back, in the thumb, is all covered. And then you go from that B to an A to a G. Now, if you were to do the C, you would do this. C is higher than B, so it starts off the C scale. You flip from that to this. So here's the C, and the tone hole is covered, and then you take that C and you flip it up and put this down. That gives you the B. That's 1 step below that C. Tone hole is still covered. Then you can add the second note, the second hold. That gives you an A, and then you add the third one, and you get your G. If I wanted a D, it's a little tricky to do that. So to begin with, I wouldn't be teaching you that, but just to show you that. You would get to it in time, however. So if you want to do lower than the G, you just add 1 whole. This is the F, this is the E, and this is the D. F, E, D, and if your finger can stretch, and sometimes it's hard to do it if you're just beginning, and cover these 2 little holes down here, then you get that low C. So that's basically a scale, and you can go up the scale as well as down. And so you have the whole scale. It's not that hard to play, but it does have some little quirks in it. All instruments have little quirks in them. But you have to really understand, hold it up like this, kind of not straight down, but a little bit slanted. Have the tone hole covered in the back for a beginner. That's you would always do that way. Then play that B, have your first finger down, put it in your mouth about 1/3 of the way in. Then when you put your tongue up there, you are tonguing it. Your tongue actually hits the rim of this mouthpiece here where you blow in. Then you can just add a note here, that will be the A. Add another note here, that will be the G. This will be the F. Now, some instruments are Baroque and some instruments are English and German. Now, the Baroque instruments will have a little B, and you're probably not going to be able to see it, but most people play Baroque instruments. It's going to be a little tiny B, and it's going to be on top of or under the tone hole in the back. It's just kind of imprinted in there. It's not a big deal. It's just kind of imprinted in there, and when you get that, you know you have an instrument that has a Baroque fingering. So when you do the F, when you get the B, A, G, F, you add this. There's a little bit of difference in pitch. If it's a German instrument, you don't add the other one. You just play this, B, A, G, F, and you don't need anything else. If you have a Baroque instrument, you put this finger down. It's a little bit harder to finger, but not that hard. You're only skipping one tone hole, and it makes a little bit of a difference in the pitch. Is a little different than. You can tell when I play it, there's a slight difference in the pitch between. You can see adding that makes that note a little bit flatter, but also a little bit more accurate. Most people play Baroque instruments, but people do play the Germans. There's very little difference between them. They look exactly alike, but the fingering is a little different on the Baroque instruments, and it makes some of those notes a little bit more accurate. B, A, G, F, instead of B, A, G, F. B, A, G, F. Then when you want your E, you lift this finger and put this one down. And if you're in a German instrument, this one isn't down anyway, so that would be E. But if you're playing that F on a Baroque, this is the F. And to play the E, you would have to put this finger down and this finger up. Down on the middle finger on the right, up on the fourth at the same time, so that you don't get an extra note that you don't want. And then you add the other finger down, and that gives you your D. And there's all kinds of other notes that you can play. I just want to give you a review because I know some people come in and watch a show for a while. They haven't seen it before and they don't have a clue as to what the fundamentals are. Others have been watching for a long time, so it's kind of a review for them. The recorder is a marvelous instrument. It's used in many orchestras, not just recorder orchestras, but it's included in other orchestras. I play it a lot, and I play it for church services. I do concerts with it. I arrange music, even classical music for it, which I play, and it can play very, very well. It has a little limitation in terms of the number of the keys that it can play. It can't play all the keys that a regular flute would be able to play, but at the same time, it plays many of the keys that most instruments play all the time. So you can get your C, key of G, which has one sharp. You can have the key of D, which is two sharps. I'll be going into all of that as part of the review. But what you learn always first, how to hold it, how to put it together, how to put it in your mouth, how to blow into it, how to tongue, particularly how to tongue. And then you add all the other things, how you read music, what the notes are, how you finger those notes. That all comes, and so we will be reviewing that. It's like, in a sense, I'm taking you back to the beginning, but I need to do that every so often because of the fact that many people will be watching that haven't watched before, and they need to have that kind of instruction. If you already know, it is a review for you. You can play many interesting things. I compose a lot of music for recorder, basically so people can learn how to finger notes and how to play it and that kind of thing. But it's interesting the way it can play waltzes and marches and all kinds of classical music. So it's a beautiful instrument. And they come in different sizes. You have your larger ones, you have your altos, you have your tenors, you have your basses. I have all of those, which I bring in from time to time. Most people play these sopranos, which are about a foot long. They're also called descants. It's another name for them. And most instruments are really in pitch. You don't have to do much in terms of pitch. Once in a while, you'll find an instrument that's out of pitch. These are tunable a little bit, not a whole lot, but they are tunable a little bit, and they fit in. I do the Messiah every year, Handel's Messiah, on a recorder. Not the whole thing, but certain pieces that I do, and they can play it very well, can play some very complicated music. So I want to go forth with this review, go into tonguing techniques and fingerings and notes and reading music, the basics. I think every so often we need to review the basics, and so that's the kind of thing that I'll be doing and taking you back to that point, and so you can kind of follow along, and then we get more and more complicated as we go. So I'm going to close it here. We'll be continuing with this next time. Please join me then.